sometimes, and this is probably the hottest take imaginable and not accurate, I don't think, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm angry. Sometimes it feels like the players care more about the game than Blizzard themselves. It's almost like Limit and Echo are fighting against Blizzard more so than they are fighting against Sylvanas. Okay, well, let's talk about how Blizzard fucked something up again for the millionth time. And it's kind of frustrating to talk about this because I feel as though every one of my videos meets either one of two requirements, right? I either talk about criticisms of Blizzard that I think are very valid, and some of which I'm going to be bringing up today, and I get labeled a hater, or I talk about some things that I think Blizzard is doing quite well, some of the improvements they made in Shadowlands, for example, and I get labeled a shill. So there's a real gray area I'm trying to meet here, but for today, let's talk about the World First Race and how the World First Race is a total catastrophe. And I'm gonna just quickly preempt everything I'm about to say by just specifying that I am not a particularly huge proponent of the World First Race. I rarely follow it, but it's still fun to keep my eye on it every so often. I keep it open on the other monitor. I'm not like preach. I'm not tweeting about it or anything like that constantly, although all the more power to that. I think it's an awesome event. I really love the World First Race, and that's exactly, why I am going to talk about it here and how I'm going to talk about it here. Because while I may not be like someone who watches it 24/7 or for 16 hours a day, such as, how long the streams generally go, I do love the concept of the World First Race. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to showcase the peaks of WoW, some of the highs. And let's not, beat around the bush here. World of Warcraft is a seasonal competitive game. It's an MMORPG that offers a wide variety of playstyles for a lot of people, but ultimately, the way Blizzard is making it right now, the designs they are implementing make it a competitive seasonal game. Why is it competitive? Because the skill ceiling to the game is incredibly high. Much like League of Legends, for example, has an incredibly high skill ceiling, but a large casual player base that's just plays the casual matches, and I'm one of those players usually, so that's perfectly fine for me. And I love both of these elements here, right? I love that it can facilitate both, but it is at the end of the day a competitive game. It is at the end of the day, a difficult professional game on these levels, on these tiers, and that's what the World First Race really showcases. But what do I mean by seasonal? Obviously a game like League of Legends is seasonal. Every year is one season, and as the game progresses, new things are added every season, and there are patches in the season, etc. But MMORPGs, they go expansion wide, right? Like, every expansion is a broad stroke of content, and then smaller drops of content in the patch cycle, and then after a few patches, the new expansion drops. And those patches can be seen as seasons, but generally in the past were not seen as seasons. They were seen as mainly just tiers of just progressively evolving content. But due to the way World of Warcraft exists now, which is to say there's either Mythic Plus or rating and PvP, of course, all of these things are highly competitive at the top ends, and lead to creating incredibly competitive environments for players to engage with. And every season, the reason I call it a season is because there's almost a hard reset. The resets we experience every season are equivalent to those of expansion-wide resets, something that has become a really common talking point amongst many, I guess, Blizzard fans or people who criticize Blizzard, whatever, is that every season, every patch, it's almost like the power growth is that of an expansion, which is to say that the levels in which we grow in power are equivalent to those of previous expansions. So between TBC, at the end of TBC in your Sunwell gear, to hitting level 80 in Wrath of the Lich King, the increase in DPS is in some cases less than percentage-wise, of course, less than the increase in DPS between just content patches in retail WoW. A perfect example of this is looking at the DPS between patch 8.2 and 8.3 in BFA. So between Eternal Palace with the Essence system, which had a huge increase in DPS, to Corruption gear, where we went from doing like 50k to doing like 150k. I mean, it was like exponential to an extreme, and we experience that, generally speaking, every patch now. Not to that extreme, but similar. Like right now, I'm assuming by the end of this patch with the domination sockets, we're going to be pulling around 10 to 12k DPS consistently versus the 7 to 8k we're doing right now, and versus the 6-ish k we were doing in the previous patch. So that's a reset, right? You come into the new patch and all of your gear is almost instantly replaced. Even if you're at the top end mythic rating, you can go into heroic and get substantially better gear into the new heroic rate and get substantially better gear. And this is a positive and negative thing. You know, everybody likes getting gear, but it does seem to devalue the content as a whole. So it is seasonal in that way. And Blizzard is treating it and creating it seasonally. So every season, every patch, we get a world first race. As you can see here right now, we're watching Limit die to fucking Sylvanas. And it's compelling and frustrating and everything in between. All the emotions have been felt. Echo, had this whole conundrum happen with Sylvanas the other day, which is to say yesterday or 2 days ago at this point, where they essentially, quote unquote, down her, or so to speak, we thought they would at 50%, which is when she dies on normal and on heroic. But I guess Blizzard had a very confusing, kind of undocumented hotfix to Sylvanas and Kel'Thuzad to make them, harder, I guess, just numerically harder. And I want to make a whole video about how Sylvanas is a horrible boss fight and probably one of the worst end bosses since Deathwing. I'm gonna go ahead and say this: it's the worst final boss since Deathwing, and probably worse than Deathwing in many ways. It's probably worse than Deathwing in many ways. I think Sylvanas is a horrible fight. I'm doing Sylvanas heroic. Now obviously not mythic, but from what we can see on mythic, it is harder, but it by no means looks particularly different or more interesting on mythic. It's just kind of more of the same and tuned to an absolute extreme, which is expected on a mythic difficulty. And that's kind of disappointing for a fight that has been touted as the most epic fight, by Blizzard. Like, we're trying to make the coolest fight. And unfortunately, they've failed on just about every conceivable metric. I have not seen anyone claim that Sylvanas is a particularly good fight. I've seen them claim that she is cool looking. Yeah, visually, the fight looks pretty cool, as you can see. But mechanically, narratively, from a design perspective, all of it, even on Mythic, which is to say I am just looking at what it is on Mythic, it feels pretty under-designed. There are fights on Heroic before Sylvanas that have more memorable mechanics than Sylvanas herself, which is a bit questionable. But way more importantly than just that, because we can deal with one mediocre or bad boss fight if it means getting a great raid, and to a certain extent we got a great raid. There's a ton of great fights within the Sanctum of Domination. It's just disappointing that Sylvanas is not particularly great. But what's so much more disappointing to me than a bad final boss is the way that Blizzard has been reacting to this world first race. It's almost as if and this is not unheard of, they're tuning the raid as it's quote unquote being tested by these top guilds. And these are incredibly skilled players who've done months of preparation for this raid on PTR. They're aware of the fights for the most part, and Blizzard is responding to many of their moves, right? So if they're like find a bug on a fight, Blizzard tries to fix that bug. Of course, they're late sometimes, such as the Kel'Thuzad before Sylvanas essentially featured was it Echo or Limit? I forget. I think it was Echo. Just completely cheesing the fight with a trinket that Blizzard themselves added in this raid that made the fight a joke. Like, Kel'Thuzad completely toppled on Mythic in like 20 pulls. It was hilarious. Do I think that they don't deserve the kill? No, of course not. I'm sorry. I should say, of course they do deserve the kill. I don't think that they don't deserve the kill. Just to clarify, I think it's perfectly reasonable to utilize a trinket that Blizzard added. And Blizzard just didn't think about things like this for whatever reason, or didn't have time to fix things like this, and they found out how to do it. So I think that, hey, you get what you get, right? Blizzard, you get what you get. You release a game, you don't fully test it, or at least the patch, you don't fully test the trinkets and the way they interact with the boss fights, and your boss fights fall over. Fine, take it, right? Take it, patch it later, whatever. With Sylvanas, it's a much more frustrating situation. Beyond just the fight being lame on many levels, the actual tuning that's happening is frustrating to witness. It's almost like Limit and Echo are fighting against Blizzard more so than they are fighting against Sylvanas, which kind of makes sense narratively, I guess, because a lot of Sylvanas' story just kind of feels like Blizzard shoehorning her into various niches and crevices within the narrative of the game. But like, man, what a disappointing ending to this race, because otherwise it was a complete nail biter. I mean, these guilds were progressing almost at the same pace, within the same rhythm as each other, and then they got her to 50%. By all means, she probably should have died, and now we found out that she actually dies at 45%. So now Limit and Echo, specifically Echo, who discovered this change, they need to figure out how to get that extra 5%. But beyond like just that, like Preach already made a video about this, which I recommend everybody watches. I'm going to link it down below. But beyond just that, I want to talk about how Blizzard failed to capitalize on this race as a whole, and just on every race. I kind of get it in BFA when the race was a bit new, but in Shadowlands, by all means, Blizzard needed to fucking capitalize on the World First race. There are 300,000 people watching this race simultaneously, and that is not counting the YouTube, that is not counting any restreams. That is 300,000 people on Twitch alone watching this race and hopefully enjoying it. This is a wonderful opportunity for marketing. This is a wonderful opportunity to showcase your best content, because almost inarguably, World of Warcraft's best content has always been, and probably always will be, its raids. So why is Blizzard not capitalizing on this? It's so fucking confusing. From these bugs that riddle the raid, which is expected, fine, whatever, to just how frustrating the experience of having these like confusing hot fixes like come out in the middle of nowhere, to just Echo figuring out this really awesome, like almost ingenious strategy to dealing and inking out more DPS from Sylvanas, eking out more DPS in the second phase of the Sylvanas encounter, a phase that looks really tedious and boring to do 180 times. They figured out this awesome strategy. Again, Preach talks about it more, link down below. But essentially speaking, they divvy up the group, because in the Mythic phase, there needs to be two different raid groups. Essentially, you split up your raid group and do the mechanics separately. They figured out a way to get 19 people into one phase and then focus them all on Sylvanas towards the end, which really got them a huge advantage in the third phase from a damage perspective. And of course, 3 pulls in, Blizzard hotfixes it, changes the whole thing completely, nullifies the strategy. Because I guess it's not about killing the fight, it's about killing the fight in a way that Blizzard wants you to kill the fight. And there's a very fine line between bugs, between exploits, which should be fixed, by the way, they should be fixed, to this awesome strategy where a Blood DK manages to survive for like 90 seconds by himself while the raid does the rest of the mechanics. That's a really cool strategy, and in no situation should this strategy not have worked. Like there should not be a place where Blizzard's like, well, they're not doing it exactly how we predicted, so let's just take it out of the game. That is such a lame solution, because the interest of the raid, the fascination between a new raid is figuring out how to do a fight. And if there's only one way to do a fight, then the fight isn't particularly interesting. It's not much of a puzzle, especially not in a video game, which is supposed to be, a reaction. It's supposed to be you reacting to what's given, not just finding out the mandatory way to kill something, and that was such a disappointment. And this really does lead me to this whole idea of Blizzard not capitalizing on the race. This should be a moment for Blizzard. And something I really said on Twitter is they need more Crucibles, more Trials of Valor, which, if you guys don't know, the Crucible of the Storms and the Trial of Valor was a relatively new addition to the WoW philosophy, where in the mid patches, which is to say the 0.5 patches between the main patches, they release a small, very challenging raid to, I guess, have more content in the game, to get the more challenging players the more skilled players who've already downed the current content to get more content to do. This is wonderful. Regardless of what you think of the quality of these raids, I know some people didn't particularly enjoy Trial of Valor or what is it called? Crucible of the Storms. Fine, okay? You don't have to enjoy that raid. That's perfectly fine. But from a marketing perspective, this gives these world first players, these absolutely beastly individuals, right? These behemoths of skill, more content to do. And what does more content for them to do mean? More viewers. What does more viewers mean? More eyes on the game. This is the time where WoW is at the top of Twitch. Top. The best, the most viewed game. And any reason for that to happen should be a celebration for Blizzard. But it feels like Blizzard doesn't even give a fuck about growing their game anymore. It's like, and there's some people that say maybe that that creating this kind of environment where you only you promote the competitive aspects of the game but not the social aspects of the game kind of gives new players or potential players the wrong idea, or this is not how the game works, it's not how the game works. But it's fine, I mean, if we can use cinematic trailers to market the game, we can surely use Limit and Echo fucking downing bosses to market the game. This is a wonderful way to showcase the game, because there's been this weird stigma about WoW sometimes that it's not a hard game when it is easily the most challenging MMORPG, and it's not even remotely close. And that's due to Blizzard's design team. Like, believe it, that is because of Blizzard's talented design team creating these encounters. Even when they fail, like Sylvanas, it's still a fucking challenge. It's still difficult. And it's just confusing to me that Blizzard really doesn't seem to give a fuck about creating a compelling race. You could argue that, well, they artificially extended the Sylvanas encounter, so that must be them caring. It's not, because anyone with any optics insight would understand that them doing this is just cancerous, right? Like, it's just a really obnoxious thing, and you rather have the race be short but sweet instead of long and tedious. And that leads us to the weekly reset that's coming up here, again covered by Preach in the description below in more detail, but essentially speaking that if this race goes up to the next week, and if ultimately the solution is just have more DPS on Sylvanas and do it like they say, like Blizzard says, then the US is going to win. Limit's going to win, right? Because the US has an earlier reset than Europe, so they get a chance to experience the raid before them. That would be such an underwhelming end to the race. Who would be happy with that? Not even Limit would be happy with that. And I guess my point here is that Blizzard, come on. This is your chance to market your game. There are more viewers, there are more simultaneous viewers on this race than your launch video for the whole patch. If that does not show you that you have new eyes on this game, I do not know what will. This is your chance to show the best of what the game has to offer. This is the first step in kind of making WoW not look bad. And I hate to say it, but WoW's been looking bad. All of Blizzard has been looking bad as of recently. You just lost your most popular streamer to Final Fantasy XIV. I'm not saying Asmongold's quitting. I'm just saying that he's playing Final Fantasy XIV and has been and hasn't streamed WoW in the past week and a half. You just lost a huge portion of your free marketing. Why are you not using this as another portion of that quote-unquote free marketing? Sometimes, and this is probably the hottest take imaginable, and not accurate, I don't think, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm angry. Sometimes it feels like the players care more about the game than Blizzard themselves. Or at least the head developers, at least some of the directors. Like, this is such an obvious thing to utilize, you know? Like, this is such an obvious point of marketing for Blizzard. Because through all the bugs, through all of this dog shit tuning, through all the disappointment that is Sylvanas as a whole, you still have, Limit and Echo and Method and BDG and BDGG, all these wonderful guilds killing it, making your game look better than you have been able to. And you don't seem to give a fuck. That's disappointing. That's really disappointing. I hope that in the next race, things are a bit smoother. I really hope. But I am ultimately just really disappointed with the conclusion before it even happened. Because it just seems like failed, This seems to have went the worst possible way. Okay, well, that's all I have to say about it. I kind of covered the race a little bit, but just ultimately a little bit disappointed with Blizzard. And by little, I mean a lot. I'm a lot disappointed with Blizzard. I hope that they get their shit together, and I hope they rebound like they did with Legion. That's something I've always said in all my videos. Hey, Blizzard, make another Legion. Please, rebound. Like, it's wild. Going from fucking the Shadowlands comment section where everyone's ragging on you in every video to watching the Karazhan dungeon recreation YouTube preview where everyone's like, oh my god, this looks awesome. Blizzard saving the game. Blizzard saving World of Warcraft. Blizzard returning WoW to its amazing state. Like, all these amazing comments I've seen back in Legion. Like, you can go look at them yourself right now. It's wild. I've never seen so much positivity next to Blizzard in the past half a decade. To now, where everyone is just sad and worn out and disappointed. Which sucks, because I know for a fact there's a great game in there somewhere. I'm sure as hell enjoying it.